"Hey, move along, old man. You're creeping out the customers." The manager's voice sliced through the cozy hum of chatter at the Hilltop Café. A few people laughed, and some lifted their phones, ready to film. The man they mocked didn't argue. He simply reached into his threadbare coat and pulled out a small case, one that silenced the entire room. Inside it was something rare and sacred, a medal of honor. If you believe dignity never expires, type respect in the comments. Franklin, 75, rarely spoke unless spoken to. Most mornings, you could find him on a park bench outside, downtown city center, bundled up against the cold, his life tucked into a weathered backpack. The sun shimmered off his gray beard as he watched hurried footsteps pass by. He didn't ask for money, didn't raise his voice, just nodded at those who noticed him, if anyone did. A quiet soul in a world moving too fast to care. That morning, the wind had a cruel edge, and Franklin's coat, patched and thin, did little to keep it out. As he adjusted his seat, he noticed a woman, older than him perhaps, struggling across the street. Her grocery bags had given out, apples scattered toward the curb, and a carton of eggs broke on the sidewalk. Without a second thought, Franklin crossed the street and bent down to help. His fingers, once steady enough to defuse live ordnance, overseas, now shook from the cold, but he gathered every apple gently. "Thank you, sweetheart," the woman said, her voice soft with surprise and gratitude. Franklin didn't reply. He simply tied the torn bag with an old shoelace from his pocket, gave a nod, and turned away before she could say more or try to offer anything in return. Back on the curb, the wind clawed at him. He spotted a small cafe across the street, steam fogging its windows, the smell of fresh coffee leaking out every time the door opened. He hesitated, then pushed the door open. Just a few minutes of warmth. That's all he needed. Inside, no one greeted him. The young man at the counter noticed, but didn't say a word. Franklin took a seat in a quiet corner and began rubbing his hands together, trying to coax warmth back into his fingertips. The cafe buzzed, baristas shouting orders, customers clicking away on laptops, espresso machines hissing like background music to a life he no longer belonged to. Still, for a moment, he felt part of it again. Minutes ticked by. Then came the whispers. A woman at the next table leaned toward her partner, her nose scrunching up. "He smells like the alley," she murmured. A man in a blazer raised his phone and took a photo, chuckling, adding a little street vibe to the latte scene. Then came the manager. Early 30s, hairstyled sharp, dress shirt ironed to perfection. His walk had confidence, but his eyes lacked kindness. He made a beeline to Franklin's table and spoke loud enough for every ear. "This isn't a day shelter. You can't just sit here," he said, voice firm and performative. "I'm not hurting anyone," Franklin replied, standing slowly, knees stiff from years of hard miles. "You're hurting the atmosphere," the manager snapped. "Take your trash and go." Laughter spread like a match catching dry grass. Someone clapped. Another recorded. Franklin's shoulders sank, but he didn't argue. Instead, he reached inside his coat and retrieved a box, its velvet worn and edges frayed. With slow, practiced hands, he opened it. The metal inside glinted faintly under the cafe lights, a 5-point star hanging from a ribbon sky blue and dotted with 13 stars. The cafe froze. Even the espresso machine seemed to go quiet. The manager blinked, confused. "What? Is that supposed to impress me?" Near the exit, a teenage boy gasped. "That's the highest military medal there is. They give it to heroes, real ones." Behind him, the woman Franklin had helped earlier stepped forward. "You're him," she said, voice trembling. "You were on the news, back in Grayton. Pulled men out of a burning chopper." Her voice cracked. "You saved lives." Franklin didn't respond, just looked down at the medal, then back up with eyes not angry, just deeply worn. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble," he said softly. "I just wanted to feel human for a few minutes." The manager shifted, suddenly uncertain, but no apology came. Instead, a young waitress with streaked hair and a silver nose ring walked over. She placed a warm cup of coffee in front of Franklin. "On the house," she whispered. "Please stay." Another customer, mid-40s, business attire, stood up and said what no one else had the guts to. "You shouldn't have to show proof of honor just to be treated with decency." Franklin gave a tired smile. "That's not why I carry it," he said, running a thumb across the edges of the medal. "I carry it for those who can't. The ones who never made it home." The video went viral within hours. First local groups shared it, then Reddit, then national news picked it up. The caption read, "They mocked a homeless man until they saw the truth." Veterans flooded the Comments. One wrote, "That's Sergeant Franklin Hayes. Saved my father in Vietnam. Been looking for him for years." Another said, "We throw parades, but forget the heroes after the confetti hits the ground." Outrage hit politicians, celebrities, and social media like wildfire. But Franklin, he tucked the medal away, nodded his thanks, and stepped into the cold, still the invisible man, still without a place to go. If this moment struck you, type "unfair" below and share his story. No one who wore that uniform should ever feel forgotten. The next morning, a quiet crowd began to form outside the Hilltop Café. Word had spread fast, too fast for the staff or even the owner to prepare. Veterans in full uniform lined the sidewalk, standing at attention without a word. Some civilians came too, many holding miniature American flags or homemade signs that read, "Respect all who served." Someone had laid a small bouquet of red and white carnations near the front door. Inside the cafe, the atmosphere had shifted. The owner, Gregory Miles, who had inherited the business from his father, a Vietnam veteran, stood silently in front of the TV, watching the video footage again. It had been recorded from multiple angles, replayed now across social media, news outlets, and even morning talk shows. He hadn't been present the day it happened, but the shame on his face said he felt every moment of it. He issued a public statement immediately, voice cracking. "With remorse. We failed someone who deserved better. This cafe was built on my father's values, service, humility, and gratitude. What happened here violated all of that. The manager responsible has been suspended indefinitely. We are committed to making this right, if Sergeant Hayes will allow us the opportunity." At exactly 10 a.m., the cafe doors swung open, and a tall man stepped inside. His uniform was crisp, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. Silver eagles gleamed on his shoulders. A decorated officer through and through. The chatter stopped. Even the coffee machines went quiet. "I'm looking for Sergeant Franklin Hayes," the officer announced, his tone both commanding and respectful. The young waitress who had served Franklin the previous day stepped forward. "He hasn't been back, sir," she said, a little unsure. The officer gave a small nod. "Then we'll wait." An hour passed. Customers came and went. Veterans still stood outside. Then, at last, a figure appeared at the far end of the block. Franklin walked slowly toward the cafe, his posture cautious. In one hand, he held a wrinkled brown paper bag, everything he owned inside it. He paused when he saw the gathering, unsure of whether to turn around or keep going. The officer stepped forward and saluted him sharply. "Sergeant Hayes," he said with reverence, "we've been trying to locate you for over 4 decades. Franklin blinked. "Why now?" "Because," the officer replied, "you saved lives and vanished. Your commendation paperwork was never fully processed. But more than that, the country owes you a proper thank you, and the world needs to remember men like you." He handed Franklin a framed service certificate, freshly signed and sealed. With it came a neatly folded American flag, the kind they usually present at funerals. The crowd burst into applause, but Franklin held up a hand gently. "Don't clap," he said softly. "Just remember the ones who never got the chance to come home. Remember them when you pass by someone sleeping on a bench." Moved by the moment, the cafe owner made a new announcement right there. From that day forward, the quiet booth by the window would be known as Sergeant Franklin Hayes Corner, reserved for veterans and always free of charge. A fresh cup of coffee would always be waiting. Franklin sat down, sipping that cup, slowly, the first he'd been served with dignity in years. The cafe was hushed, not out of discomfort, but out of respect. No side glances, no whispers, no laughter, only silence and warmth. A local news reporter, watching from the crowd, gently approached him. "Sergeant Hayes, what happens next for you?" Franklin looked puzzled, like the question hadn't even occurred to him. "Same thing I've always done. Keep walking forward. That's what soldiers do." As he stood to leave, the officer leaned in and said quietly to the cafe owner, "Men like him, they don't know how to give up." The owner nodded, eyes still wet. "I've never felt smaller or more ready to be better." "Then Sergeant Hayes has already fulfilled another mission," the officer said. "That's what real heroes do. They don't need fanfare. They just change the world by being in it." By nightfall, the ripple effect of Franklin's story was visible across the country. Restaurants started offering free meals to veterans. One small town set up a free care shelter with Franklin's name on the wall. A family in Wisconsin offered him a guest cottage on their land. A veteran-run supply company created a special job listing, tailor-made for someone like him. The world hadn't transformed overnight, but in one quiet corner of it, kindness made a comeback. A month later, a bronze plaque appeared just outside the cafe's entrance. It read, "This seat is dedicated to all those who gave more than we'll ever know, in honor of Sergeant Franklin Hayes and every unsung hero walking beside us." Franklin now lives in a modest apartment arranged by a local veterans charity. His room is simple, bare walls, one blanket, and a photo of his old unit framed above his bed. Each morning he walks with slow purpose, cap always on, posture proud. Children wave when they see him. Adults pause to shake his hand. Once a week, he returns to the cafe. Always the same seat. Always just a black coffee. He doesn't say much. He never did. But when another veteran joins him, no words are needed. Their silence says it all. Sometimes, a curious customer asks about the medal still tucked in his coat pocket. Franklin simply says, "It's not for what I did. It's for those who didn't make it back to carry theirs." The Hilltop Cafe has become more than a place to grab coffee. It's a gathering place for stories, for memory, for healing. The invisible are seen again. And in that corner booth, one man still reminds the world, quietly, humbly, that true honor never demands attention. It just endures. If you believe heroes walk among us in silence, honor them by subscribing to Steel Heart Stories. Because some warriors never stop serving,